I Hate Politics is a podcast about a human activity we love to hate. I'm Sunil Dasgupta. This week, I talked to James Hedrick, chair of Rockville Housing Enterprises, the public housing authority for the city of Rockville in Maryland, about the challenges of getting truly affordable housing at the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder. Housing affordability is one of the biggest challenges in Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, and Montgomery County Council is currently considering a new general plan that would open more land currently reserved for single-family homes to multifamily home construction. Currently, 1.9% of the land area in the county is zoned for multifamily housing. If you are new to the show, I Hate Politics is a podcast about our neighborhoods, workplaces, schools and streets, and our local governments as they function in diverse and democratic societies. This means our politics are messy, dirty, sometimes corrupt, with often self-serving politicians. But no matter how much we may hate politics, we are never exempt from it, even when we refuse to participate. In fact, the purpose of politics is to keep society functioning precisely when we don't agree with each other, like now. It is my hope that this podcast will help those who feel left out reconnect in our local communities. Music for this episode comes from the Treading Lemmings, a Rockville-based Brit-pop band in the genre of the Smiths. Their music is available at Reverb Nation. In the news roundup this week, the city of Gaithersburg re-elected Judd Ashman as mayor and two new city council members, Lisa Henderson and Jim McNulty. Following several fights at MCPS football games this school year, some up-county school community members want their SROs back. County Executive Mark Eldridge had restructured the SRO, the School Resource Officer program, to station police officers in communities rather than inside schools. Worth noting that fights at school are common, not just in the up-county. And fights broke out regularly even when the old SRO program was active. The movement to remove SROs from schools was led by MCPS students. Montgomery County had a mask mandate which was removed after 7 days of low COVID transmission, and then the county went back to substantial transmission, which would have brought back the mask mandate. But the county council acted to extend the period of time of substantial transmission to push back the return of masks. In all of this back and forth, what goes missing is the importance of policy predictability. On now, off now would be very confusing, for example, for young students who are required by the public school system to wear masks inside schools. County-run ride-on buses also continue to require masks. As 15 to 11-year-olds are vaccinated, expect masking opponents to push further against the return of masking, even though it is useful against breakthrough infections. Montgomery Parks brought back its Picnic in the Parks program that allowed alcohol use in 13 county parks. Initially introduced as an emergency measure in the early months of COVID in 2020, the program was stopped after the state of Maryland declared an end to the emergency. Now the Parks Department is back with the program. The county government has decided to continue with its Streeteries program, which closed some streets so restaurants could serve diners outdoors. Audubon Naturalist Society, the environmentalist advocacy group that sits on a large wooded acreage in Chevy Chase in Montgomery County, is looking for a new name. Following revelations over the last few years that John James Audubon, the man after whom they are named, was a slave owner who also stole skulls to enable race science, besides being a bird artist who inspired the American birding movement. With the County Redistricting Commission recommending new district maps, a number of candidates have announced their intention to run for the county council. Among them, Don Lutke, State Assistant Attorney General and wife of Delegate and Majority Leader Eric Lutke, Will Roberts of the Renters Alliance, Daniel Koroma, a county employee and a community organizer, and Carla Silvestri, who has filed for re-election to the Board of Education. Among the more interesting races to watch out for is the Senate seat in District 18 in Montgomery County. Max Sokol, a progressive challenger, is running against incumbent Jeff Wallstreicher. Direct challenges to incumbent state representatives are hard to pull off because state reps tend to run as a slate, magnifying their resources and support. We will continue to interview candidates. If you are a candidate or have a favorite one, please reach out by email at ihppod@gmail.com or on Twitter at ihppod. In keeping with the elections theme, hard to miss the elephant in the room. Glenn Youngkin and the Republican Party won big in Virginia. Northern Virginia, to which Montgomery County is often compared to, is solid blue. Both parties are going to draw their own lessons, but the lesson I am wondering about is whether Youngkin's victory and the resulting distaste it means for Democrats will finally rebalance the narrative that Northern Virginia was a rising star to Montgomery County's fading one. Does politics matter in that way, or are we all just about economics and development? Nearly 30 years ago, Ralph Reed, the conservative pioneer, said that he would rather have 1,000 school board members than one president. This week, Lily Geismer and Eitan Hirsch, history and politics professors, wrote an op-ed in the New York Times harnessing the same idea from the left. The merits or defects of local democracy are a bit beside the point. Local politics is the place for citizens to go if they want to exert control over the political process. When turnout is only 10 to 20%, it doesn't take much organizing to win elections. When decisions are made in public hearings, 20 passionate residents can make a big difference on policy. The idea that government closest to us is the most useful government goes back to Thomas Jefferson at least, but this theory of democracy has one big hole. We know less about government as it gets closer to us. We know more about the White House than we know about Congress. We know more about Congress than we know about state politics. And we know more about the state than we know about the county. And we know more about the county than we know about our HOA or a PTA, which isn't even considered to be politics at that point, and where gossip is the primary currency. This is the hole we fill at I Hate Politics. I hope you'll subscribe and share the podcast with your friends and family as we bring you stories about politics close to you and your home. I'll be back with James Hedrick, chair of Rockville's Public Housing Authority. You're listening to I Hate Politics. I'm Sunil Dasgupta.
This and not the other. Don't ask, don't even bother. The bait and sweet, she's on and I've rejected what's on offer. Smoke 'em if you got 'em. The top is not the bottom. The winter chili's good, yet I'm an Easter-tized tail autumn. And how great was my
James Hedrick, welcome to I Hate Politics.
Oh, thanks, Sunil. I'm really glad to be here.
Can you explain what Rockville Housing Enterprises is?
It is a lot of things, is what it is. Rockville Housing Enterprises is the public housing authority for the city of Rockville. So the 70,000 people that live within the city limits of Rockville. And a public housing authority is kind of like a cross between a government agency and a nonprofit. So we're basically charged by the city of Rockville. We're independent from the city, but they control our board to administer federal housing programs for the most part. So we do the Housing Choice Voucher Program, commonly known as Section 8. We administer public housing, David Skull Courts, which is over off Goody, several other programs that come in through Fed money, mostly from HUD. And so we administer most of those programs on behalf of the city.
You are unique in the sense that no other municipality in Montgomery County has a similar public housing authority.
Yeah, not that I'm aware of that has one. There's us and there's HOC, which is the county Housing Opportunities Commission. The county's got about 1.1 million folks. We've got about 70,000 in Rockville, so they are an order of magnitude bigger than we are.
Okay. What is your portfolio? How many homes do you have? What's your assets?
We've got about 400 housing choice vouchers, which is what's commonly known as Section 8. That's folks that qualify for a housing voucher. We provide the housing voucher, pay the landlord on their behalf, and they're allowed to rent in the open market. We've got about a little over 100 public housing units. Public housing is actually owned and operated directly by us, the Public Housing Authority. We've got several different programs that are smaller that are either vouchers for veterans or vouchers for foster care kids that have aged out of the foster care program. So we've got assorted mainstream vouchers too, which is disability vouchers. And then we have about 290 low-income housing tax credit units. And so all told, about 875 vouchers or units.
I've heard you at different venues be frustrated by the fact that you cannot build more and you are the public housing authority in Rockville. So let's talk about what is stopping you.
There's a couple of things. So we're organized primarily as an administrative body. That's the first thing. So before we even get to being able to finance, build, rehabilitate, produce new housing, which is desperately needed, we've still got to administer all those 875 other vouchers and properties that we manage. So that takes up a lot of our time and a lot of our effort. If we didn't have a good executive director, we probably wouldn't get to the financing or rebuilding. So we actually have a very excellent staff. So I want to give them a shout out. But after we get past all that, we have the ability and we have legal structures to build and rehabilitate and finance new housing or rehabilitate, preserve old housing as affordable.
What kind of funding authority do you have?
The vast majority of our money comes from direct federal money from HUD or a variety of grant programs that we get, mostly also through HUD, sometimes through HHS or whatnot. And then the city will often chip in for different specific projects.
Can you talk about how you fund your projects and what the challenges are?
There's two primary things that you need when you want to build or rehabilitate new housing. You got to have land and you got to have money. The land issue is tough in Montgomery County, specifically in Rockville. We can buy and purchase within Rockville. And I don't know if you've wandered around Rockville recently, not a ton of vacant properties just lying around out there to purchase. So that's the first thing. The second thing is financing, and that's where it gets really dicey. Once you find a property that you do want to purchase and rehabilitate to maintain its affordability, or something we get to do much less often, find a place where we can build something, you have to get the money to do it. And our operating budget annually is a little less than $10 million. We're not buying anything with anything in that operating budget. So what we got to do is we got to go out and find money somewhere. And usually that means going to the federal government through a combination of loan guarantees and tax credits. And a good example is our recent Fireside project. We had to layer 11 different types of financing to make that project work.
But that money is available.
Most of what you finance affordable housing through is this is the vast majority of just the amount of financing that you need, is through loan guarantees and through tax credits. So loan guarantees are very simple. Rockville Housing Enterprises is a nonprofit mission-oriented developer. I want to buy a property or rehabilitate a property that's $60 million. I need money to go, to buy that. I go and I try to get a loan from just any bank, like any other organization would get a loan. The bank does not want to loan me money because I have no collateral. All right. RHE, I can't give them my public housing if I default on the loan. I don't have a whole lot of money, sitting in a bank account that they can, put a lien on or something like that. So the federal government's way to alleviate that is to step in and offer a loan guarantee. So if I default, on the loan I get from, in the case of Fireside, it was PNC. If I default on the loan, the government covers it to a certain percentage and after a certain number of years. It's complicated, but basically they offer a loan guarantee, which lowers the rates that I would be otherwise able to get on the private market or actually get money on the private market. The other thing is what's called low-income housing tax credit. I'm going to call it LIHTC. LIHTC is where I get the equity that I need to start the whole project. Even if I get a loan guarantee from the federal government, is any bank going to loan you 100% of your mortgage? Same thing with me. No one's going to loan me every cent that I need. So I've got to have some other money somewhere. Some of that comes from grants. Some of that comes from the city. So gave us a little bit. County gave us a little bit. We got state money in there. But the biggest chunk of it, about 25% of the overall cost of the Fireside project, to give you an example, was from low-income housing tax credit. The federal government gives state housing finance agencies the ability to give out tax credits based on population. So we get more than Alaska. Maryland does. So I go to the state housing finance agency. They give me a tax credit. Well, the tax credit doesn't do me any good. Why? I don't pay taxes. I'm a government, organization. I'm a public housing authority. I don't pay taxes. So those tax credits don't do me any good unless I do what? I have to sell them. All right. And I sell them, it's typically to a corporation of some type that needs a tax credit. And so it lowers I sell them to them, it lowers their
So
tax
there's a market for these kinds of credits?
There's a market for these type of credits, mostly, or at least predominantly, they're bought by financial organizations, banks, basically, because of something called the Community Reinvestment Act. Back from the 90s. It's called the CRA. So a bank has to do a certain amount, banks, credit unions, stuff like that, have to do a certain amount of lending within their area, within their geographic region for, low-income housing, economic development, what have you. Tax credits count for that. So in the Fireside example, PNC Real Estate was the one that bought our tax credits. So they loaned us the money and then they also bought the tax credits.
Let's talk a little bit about land. You said you can't find land, of course. So explain that problem.
It's tough. For the most part, it's to a certain part, it's a zoning issue. If land, I can't, there's no way I can make the financing work on a single family home. It doesn't make sense for us as an organization to buy and rent out single family homes. Even if we can, make that turnaround fast enough or have the money, cash on hand or what have you. So I'm usually looking to build multifamily, and there's just a lot of places where I'm legally prohibited from building multi.
So explain that. In the city of Rockville, where are you allowed to build and where are you not allowed to build?
Mostly in the city of Rockville, most of the neighborhoods are zoned primarily or predominantly or only single family. Mostly along the major streets and stuff is where you'll find the zoning to build multifamily. Usually it's multifamily mixed, which means it will have commercial in it. So, Rockville Pike, Park Street, stuff like that, down around town center, that kind of thing. But it's a relatively small amount of overall land, and there's just not a lot of land in Rockville that goes on sale in the first place. There are some places over like by 270 and things like that. We've looked at places over there.
And so most of the city is zoned as single family zoning, and really Rockville Housing Enterprises cannot build single family homes for that purpose because the economics doesn't work out. And so you're looking to build multifamily homes, apartments, and those are only allowed on major streets. And usually, as you described, they are commercial residential mix. Do you at all do commercial residential mix? I mean, can you get into that, or that's like the reason you can't really do it?
We could theoretically get into that. There's not much of a legal prohibition on it or anything like that, but it just adds another layer of complexity to the thing. We have experience managing residential properties and, dealing with that with landlords, basic kind of stuff like that. We just really don't operate commercial.
But you could have a partner.
We could. We've got a partner. Most LIHTC projects are going to require that you have both an investment partner, and in the case of a housing authority like us, we have a managing.
So it is possible to do commercial residential through Rockville Housing Enterprises.
It would be possible, yeah. I would not put a ton of. I wouldn't bet on it anytime in the near future.
Yeah. So the other problem that strikes me is that buying a property close to major thoroughfares is more expensive than buying away from thoroughfares.
Absolutely. Most of those properties that we could potentially buy, theoretically in a perfect world, are going to be bid up past our ability to compete on that. So what you're basically looking for is a unicorn, some property that you can rehabilitate or build on that is reasonably priced, close enough to make a difference, close enough to all your infrastructure to help out the residents, and that you can get the financing fast enough.
So why is Fireside a unicorn?
We had the opportunity. We purchased Fireside about 9 years ago. It was 2012. That's actually before I came on to the board, and it happened to be low enough cost. It was an old enough property, and it wasn't in disrepair, but it certainly hadn't been updated or since I think it was built in the 60s. It was low enough cost that we could get the financing together relatively quickly, and we could get the city to back the purchase of it. And somebody had put in an offer on it, and we used the county's right of first refusal to purchase it, which means we had to match the price that was offered by somebody else. And I think it's 120 days, I think is the time that you have to turn it around. So we had to turn around pretty fast. We just happened to have some of the financing in place, and we had some money that we had on the books that we could use for a little bit of equity to help out the financing. But we still had to go get a loan and go get some grants and stuff from the city and the county. So we turned that around. We bought it knowing that we would have to refinance and rehabilitate it. And we started that process several years ago, actually. But we happened to be in the right place at the right time. There's several other problems.
Well, the right place at the right time for 9 years.
For 9 years. It took us 9 years to go from purchase. We're currently still in the process of rehabilitating, but the construction started.
But that seems like an inordinately long period of time. That's just, what's the point at that? The demand is far outstretched what you are going to meet.
Oh, absolutely. Like it's, the Fireside is 236 units, and there are 23,000 households in Rockville. We're well under 1% with, we're well under 1% with that. All of our total housing is, we operate less than about 3-ish% of the, units either through vouchers or things. Yeah, it far outstrips the demand. And we don't have enough money, and we can't move quickly enough to really keep up.
All right. So we know the problem now. How do you fix it?
That's a very fine question. If you want to fix it on a broad scale, if you want to catch up with the demand, we've got a backlog of voucher, people that are eligible for vouchers that we don't have enough vouchers for. We've had properties come across our desk that we haven't been able to buy because we can't get them. We don't have the money. We can't get the money fast enough, or don't have the staff to do another project that might take us 9 years. Or there's properties that have come up that we can't afford because they're too large or what have you, or they have to be annexed and we can't afford to, wait on annexation, stuff like that. So when it comes right down to it, there's a federal issue and there's a local issue. The federal issue is if the money is going to be big enough for me and the housing authority to build and preserve enough housing, we have to have orders of magnitude more money than we have right now. And it's hard to get that. It's hard to get that money. Most of the money in affordable housing right now or at least the direction of that over the last several decades, has moved from construction, sort of the supply side, over to rental assistance, which is the demand side. And so most of the money that you can get is for rental assistance, or most of the money that flows regularly is for rental assistance.
Is there a theoretical limit on the low-income tax credit, LIHTC, right? That you say that, oh, my project is now worth $400 million. And so therefore, I need $100 million or $120 million in LIHTC instead of my project is $30 million and I need, $5 or $7 million in LIHTC.
Theoretically, not really. There's a 30% limit on one of the tax credits. There's a 70% for the other, but don't worry about it. Theoretically, no. Practically, the state housing authority would look a little askance at you if it's like, I have $1 billion project and need $300 million from.
But it's not their money. Why do they care?
Yeah, well, you still have to sell the tax credits, and they keep the the IRS allocates a certain number to each of the states by population, so they've only got so much.
Oh, okay. So they have a limitation.
Really so much they can give you. Yeah, there is a certain theoretical limit. Most of it, you're not going to get into it. It gets complicated on how they calculate it. But still, even if they raised the tax credit or gave out more tax credits, I can still only fund 30% of the thing off of a tax credit or tax credit equity, and it would be hard to increase that or increase the portion of it significantly because I've still got to sell the tax credits. And if I flood the market with a bunch of tax credits, correct, the price of those tax credits will crumble. So there's a point of diminishing returns. Right now, you usually get 90 cents ish, between 85 and 90 some percent, cents on the dollar for each tax credit. You start upping the amount of tax credits, you're going to really diminish the value of them. And so is it better to have X number of tax credits so that I get 75 cents on the dollar? Is
there a geographical limit for the market in which you're trying to sell the tax credit, or can you sell it in California?
I can sell them to pretty much anybody. The CRA portion of it, the fact that you get credit for it certainly does geographically affect it somewhat. So Eagle Bank, is pretty regional. It doesn't really operate in California, so they're probably not buying California tax credits. Practically, not really. Like I can sell the Bank of America or PNC pretty much any place they'll purchase. Pretty much.
In terms of the money, it is possible theoretically to get more money. Then in the private sector, they are funding the leverage on construction projects is in fact even greater than 70%, which is what you want, right? And so it's not as if funding can be found.
Funding can be found, but what makes it, what would really help, at least particularly for a small housing authority like us and for a lot of housing authorities around the country that don't have a lot of administrative slack, so to speak, is direct money. It's a lot easier to deal with a loan and loan requirements than it is to deal with tax credit and tax credit requirements. I'll talk about administrative burden, let's face it, if I'm getting 90 cents on the dollar, I'd still like to have 10% more money. It would make life easier on me. I don't directly sell, at least RHE does not directly sell our tax credits because no one wants our tax. It's not enough for anybody to really care about. So what we do is we go through, usually it'll go through for most people, it'll go through syndicators and they'll bundle them up. So you start getting pieces of it taken out. But for having equity is super, you need it because of the situation we have, because the vast majority comes from the loan guarantee. I got to have some equity to get the loan guarantee. And so if I've got, something more like the housing trust fund where I can request a grant or a loan from the housing trust fund for equity, that's one thing. If I've got, pots of money that have less strings attached to them and can get them quickly, I can move faster on projects if I can get a turnaround for a certain amount of money on different projects.
But that was going to be my question. So can Montgomery County set up a housing trust, issue bonds, and then set up the housing trust that way?
Yeah, if they wanted to set up something, there's places that have done revolving loan funds, stuff like that. For the most part, if it's county, even state level scale, sometimes it's going to be bridge financing, or here's the money to get you to the money. You know what I mean?
it is a federal scale of operation, but it could be done at the local or state level, and especially at the state level. I'd imagine that they could probably work together with the Housing Finance Authority that is administering the low-income tax credits, and sort of coordinate with them in order to make some of this available. So it really has to do a lot with political will, I guess, on the providing the money. But I want to get you back to the question of land. Even if you had money, it seems that you can't build. Right. So the city of Rockville faces this dilemma, right? You are a city of Rockville supported authority, right? The city of Rockville manages zoning. And so there seems to be a contradictory approach that they are taking in this process. What is the resolution here?
I think that the resolution has to be that you've got to open up more space for higher levels of density and more multifamily. It's not something that I can really, I can't, it's hard for me to build anywhere because there's not a lot of spaces that don't have something built on top of them that are legally allowed to build there. Like I said, the financing for buying and making single family homes affordable, just one, isn't there, and two, it doesn't make a ton of sense, particularly now that, I think Montgomery County's median house is $550,000, I think. That's, $500,000. It's not, no one's giving me $500,000 for one house that's going to house four folks. It's just, 4 or 5 folks. It's just, there's not that wouldn't be good. It's just that I just don't have that.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure even good or not, but the county council is currently considering the Planning Commission's general plan, often called Thrive 2050. And one of the parts of that plan is that it allows for more density in housing in certain areas around the county. Now, that's not going to affect Rockville at all, right? Because you are independent and all that.
Yeah, we have our own general plan. We just went through Rockville 2040, which is the Rockville general plan, which was thematically similar to Thrive 2050. It did make motions toward opening up density a little bit and allowing for the construction.
Where did it do that?
In certain parts of the city. I know specifically along the Beers Mill corridor and around the Rockville Metro, but it's a planning document. So they're, long-term trying to encourage density along particular corridors. Beers Mill is one. Rockville, around the Rockville Metro stations is another. There's a couple other spots, mostly, along the Pike, quite obviously, along Twin Brook.
So did that open up more project possibilities for you, or is that literally, rearranging the deck chairs?
It's not rearranging the deck chairs. It is a step in the right direction for allowing, more residential in more places. The issue is that it still has to be implemented through zoning, through actual changes to the zoning. The general plan doesn't necessarily say, here is the actual boundary of places that you can build things that are 4+ units, stuff like that. You have to do actual zoning changes. Same thing for Thrive 2050. That'll have to be hashed out. The other thing is a lot of the discussion in Thrive, both in Thrive and Rockville 2040, is about missing middle housing, which is, 2 to 6 unit buildings, duplexes to sixplexes. If you go around a lot of Rockville's old neighborhoods, you'll find streets that are just duplexes, but you couldn't build those today in most of those places. You can't. You could you could buy a place. You could say, I want to build a duplex on this lot, this 1/8 of an acre lot, and they're going to say, no, you can't do that.
If they've passed a general plan that allows for greater density, right, and then you make a case for here is a project, we want either you make an exception or you change the zoning in the area, and would they not, be forthcoming?
You would hope you would, but you would hope so. But that also gets to political will. A planning document is one thing, which means it has to look like this. All right, you can't change it to be only single family in a place that's multifamily or vice versa. But it doesn't necessarily affirmatively make that change. So affirmatively making that change and allowing for more density, specifically here in this area, you can build X, is different than we want over time the density to go here, in this neighborhood or along this corridor. So making that fundamental change that says, okay, that place is now, you can build a 20 unit apartment complex on there. If that's that's one thing, and somebody, if I see that and that goes through and I have an eye on property or something, like I can build townhomes now, or I can build townhomes in a few apartments or something. That really changes the calculus for, when I'm drilling down to individual properties or individual things that I can buy or finance.
So you want a housing trust fund and you want zoning change. Are you
zoning changes for the land, housing trust fund for the financing? There are plenty of other plans that plenty of other people have proposed. I like the idea of using a housing trust fund as a public bank style thing, like leveraging your certain amount as capital. And
I was going to ask you whether you're hopeful of those two things, zoning change and housing trust fund. Are you hopeful?
If they put new zoning ordinances up to do it, I'll be the first person up there to testify. I want more places. I want more affordable housing. I want more of the land in Rockville to be preserved for housing that can let all people live here, all people of all income levels. It's, there's over time, if we let it go as it's going, nobody can afford $550, $600,000 for a house. It's going to drive a lot of folks out. It's really going to have a dampening effect on the economy locally. Like there's, everybody deserves to be able to live, near where they want to live and near where their jobs are. So on the land question, yeah, I'd love to see that change so that we can build and preserve more housing in Rockville. And mostly what I would be doing, practically speaking, is preservation. Snapping up properties that I can preserve, keeping them affordable long-term and under the umbrella of a mission-oriented organization. On the financing question, yeah, I just want to not have, I made a joke about it last week when I was talking to somebody. When we closed on the Fireside, there were 31 different people on that call. 31 different people on that. That's just insane. No, it's a $60 million, $65 million dollar project. That's not nothing, but it's not Twin Brook Quarter, which is a $1 billion+ project down the street, that's got thousands of units coming in. We got a couple hundred, and it's small, mid-level project. It's the kind of thing we want to do. It's something that we've proved we can do. I want to do more of those, and I want to do more of those where it doesn't take me 9 years from start to finish.
Well, James Hedrick, thank you for coming on our Hit Politics. Good luck reducing the time it takes to get a project off the ground.
Well, thank you very much. If I'm super lucky, I'll get another one in the next decade or two. So we're doing our best. But thank you very much.
Isn't near just the menu, or possibly the venue. The lesser of two ills is hardly much to get one thrill. It wasn't meant to be. It's not you, love, it's me. I'm just not what she's looking for, but oh, I could have sworn how green was my envy. Yellow my spine. I want her mostly because I know that she can never be
mine. What lessons can we draw from my conversation with James Hedrick? First, one big question that remained unsaid or unsaid explicitly is that to get truly affordable housing, we have to have government intervention. Rockville Housing Enterprises is the city's public housing authority, and it helps leverage state and federal funds to provide affordable housing for city residents. They have a wait list of people eligible for affordable housing. If home prices and rents in the city of Rockville keep rising, and the federal subsidy does not, they will probably have to reduce the level of support they provide. For now, there may be some relief under the American Rescue Plan, but the longer-term trends in rents and home prices look ominous for the city of Rockville and for the county as a whole. State Delegate Vaughn Stewart has proposed a social housing bill that will substantially increase the state money available, something that James Hedrick could very much use. This reminds me that I need to schedule an interview with Delegate Stewart to talk about his social housing bill. Second, there simply isn't enough money out there to help the true underlying problem of affordable housing, land availability. Most of the city of Rockville, except along some large roads like Rockville Pike and Weir's Mill Road, the jurisdiction is zoned for single-family homes. Even at the low end, Rockville single-family homes cost $550,000, often more. Single-family homes are not going to be affordable in places where land cost is that high, which includes Rockville City, but also most of southern Montgomery County. But we have a legal system that does not allow multifamily homes to be built except in these narrow corridors, where it is, of course, usually mixed with commercial use. And that makes it almost impossible for an entity like Rockville Housing Enterprises to truly go after housing affordability. Unless single-family zoning is eased, housing affordability will remain a talking point. Third, the County Council is considering a new general plan that makes the case for easing single-family zoning in some parts of the county. I should add that this is making the case for. Actual change will only come if the zoning code is changed. There's been incredible pushback against this change. It is this kind of debate that makes people hate politics. But as the debate has gotten more and more heated, it is worth remembering that the solution here is political as well. There is no nifty technical solution that James Hedrick or the planning department or developers can pull off that will make this easier. Politics works when things get bad.
I need to find a place where I can spend some time. These claustrophobic friends of mine closing in around my mind. Solitude and loneliness are luxuries I must possess. I seem to spend each guarded day planning how to get away from it all. From it all. Does anybody know how to get?
That's all for this episode. You've been listening to I Hate Politics. I'm Sunil Dasgupta. Music for this episode comes from the Treading Lemmings, a Rockville-based Brit-pop band in the genre of the Smiths. Their music is available on ReverbNation.com. If you want to share your music on the show or know someone who might want to, please email us at ihppod@gmail.com or reach out on Twitter at ihppod. I hope you will subscribe and share the episode as we bring you stories about politics close to you and your home. See you next time.
Does anybody know how to get away? Does anybody know how to get away? Away.